They say clothes do not make the man, but here in Chicago, my muddy hoodie became a death sentence for 2 careers. Can you believe an $8 latte toppled a $1 million empire? Because of a simple spill. A charismatic CEO left in handcuffs, and an arrogant influencer faced the world's scorn. Let me tell you about the Tuesday I called my husband down to the lobby so he could bury his mistress with his own hands. My name is Eva Larkspur, and for the last 3 months, I have been a ghost in my own life. If you looked at the Wikipedia page dedicated to the Larkspur dynasty, you would see a polished portrait of a 29-year-old heiress with impeccable hair, wearing tailored Italian suits, standing confidently beside the gleaming model of a sustainable housing project. The caption would read, "Chairwoman," or perhaps "The Queen of Real Estate," but the woman reflected in the sliding glass doors of O'Hare International Airport bore zero resemblance to that glossy image. I looked like a wreck, and frankly, I smelled like wet pine needles and stale economy-class air. My hair was pulled back into a messy bun that was slowly unraveling, strands of it sticking to the back of my neck with sweat. I was wearing a gray oversized hoodie that had seen better days, the cuffs frayed and stained with the red clay of the Appalachian Mountains. My leggings were snagged at the knee, and my sneakers, once a pristine white pair of runners, were now caked in dried mud from a hike to a remote settlement in West Virginia 2 days ago. I had spent the last quarter of the year living in a cabin that lacked reliable electricity. Conducting a confidential field survey, I needed to know, truly know, what the housing crisis looked like from the ground level, not from the window of a penthouse. I wanted to build homes that mattered, not just tax write-offs for the wealthy. So, I vanished. I left my empire in the hands of my husband, Liam Sterling, the man who had promised to hold the fort while I did the dirty work. Stepping out of the terminal and into the biting wind of a Chicago autumn felt like a physical slap. The air here was different. It did not smell of earth and rain. It smelled of exhaust fumes, heated asphalt, and ambition. I shivered, pulling my hoodie tighter around myself. I dragged my battered rolling suitcase toward the taxi line, ignoring the black town cars idling in the VIP lane. Usually, there would be a driver waiting for me with a bottle of sparkling water in a heated seat. Today, I was just another exhausted traveler in the queue. "Where to?" the cab driver asked, eyeing my muddy shoes in his rearview mirror with thinly veiled distaste. He probably thought I was a college student returning from a disastrous camping trip, or perhaps someone down on their luck looking for a cheap hostel. "Larkspur Tower," I said, my voice raspy from disuse. The driver scoffed, a short, sharp sound of amusement. "The Gold Tower." "You work in the kitchen or something. Shift starts late today." "Something like that," I murmured, leaning my head against the cold window. I could have corrected him. I could have told him that I owned the car he was driving, the medallion on his hood, and the building we were driving toward. I could have told him that my signature alone could move millions of dollars across borders in seconds. But I stayed silent. There is a strange, intoxicating power in anonymity. For the first time in years, I was invisible. As the taxi wove through the dense traffic of the loop, the skyline rose up to meet us, and there it was, my legacy, Larkspur Tower. It pierced the gray sky like a golden needle. 50 stories of amber-tinted glass and steel that dominated the financial district. It was beautiful, undeniably so. But from this distance, it also looked cold, impenetrable. I had told Liam I would be back on Friday. It was only Tuesday. A small, nagging knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. It wasn't distrust, exactly. Liam was my husband. He was the charming, charismatic face of the operation, the man who could charm a board of directors into submission with a smile. But 3 months was a long time. Emails had been brief. Phone calls had been hurried. He always claimed he was swamped, buried under the weight of the responsibilities I had left him. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the empire my father built, and that I had expanded, was safe in his hands. But a CEO does not survive by blind faith. A CEO survives by verification. Here we are, the driver said, pulling up to the curb, a safe distance away from the main entrance where the doormen in their gold-braided uniforms were ushering polished elites into the revolving doors. I handed him a $20 bill and told him to keep the change. He looked surprised, muttering a thanks as I hauled my suitcase out of the trunk. Standing on the sidewalk, I felt small. The wind whipped around the base of the tower. Funneling through the concrete canyons, I took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of the city, and walked toward the entrance. The lobby of Larkspur Tower was designed to intimidate. That was not my design choice. It was my father's. The floors were Italian marble, polished to such a high sheen that you could check your teeth in them. The ceiling soared 3 stories high, adorned with a massive, abstract chandelier that looked like an explosion of crystals suspended in time. It was loud, the echo of high heels, the low hum of expensive conversations, the ringing of phones. It was the symphony of commerce. I pushed through the revolving door, the warmth of the building washing over me. Immediately, I felt the eyes of the room slide over me and then dismiss me. In a place where a handbag cost more than a car, I was part of the scenery, as irrelevant as a smudge on the glass. I walked slowly, dragging my case, my eyes scanning the room. I was looking for details. Were the floors clean? Were the security guards alert? Was the lighting adequate? That was when I saw the reception desk. We had a strict policy at Larkspur Holdings. Every guest, from a senator to a courier, was to be treated with dignity. It was the first rule in the employee handbook I had written myself. Behind the massive slab of black granite that served as the reception desk sat a young woman I did not recognize. She was chewing gum, her jaw working rhythmically, her eyes glued to her phone. Standing in front of her was an elderly delivery man, holding a heavy-looking package wrapped in brown paper. He looked flustered, his uniform slightly too big for his shrinking frame. "Miss," the old man said, his voice trembling slightly, "I just need a signature." "The elevator requires a pass, and—" "I told you," the receptionist snapped, not even looking up from her screen. "Deliveries go to the loading dock around the back. You can't leave that here. It ruins the aesthetic." "But the loading dock is closed," the man pleaded. "The guard said to come here. It is for Mr. Sterling. It is marked urgent." The girl finally looked up. Her makeup was heavy, a mask of contour and highlight. She looked at the old man with a sneer of pure disgust. "Does it look like I care? Take it away. You are blocking the view. If you don't move, I'm calling security to drag you out." My blood ran cold. The rage that flared in my chest was sudden and sharp. This was how my company was being represented, this insolence, this cruelty. I took a step forward, my hand tightening on the handle of my suitcase. I was about to march over there, slam my hand on the desk, and fire her on the spot. I wanted to see the color drain from her face when she realized who she was talking to, but I stopped. "Not yet," a voice in my head whispered. "If the receptionist feels comfortable behaving like this in the middle of the lobby, the rot goes deeper than the front desk." I forced myself to step back, retreating into the shadows of a large decorative pillar near the bank of VIP elevators. I needed to see more. I needed to see Liam. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb of glass fracturing the display, a souvenir from a drop on a rocky trail. I unlocked it and navigated to my contacts, my thumb hovering over the name, Julian Vance. Julian. Just thinking of his name brought a strange sense of calm to the chaos in my mind. Julian Vance was my chief legal officer, but that title did not do him justice. He was my right hand, my compass, the one person in this building who knew where all the bodies were buried because he had helped me dig the graves for our competitors. He was brilliant, stoic, and terrifyingly efficient. And unlike Liam, Julian never sought the spotlight. I started to type a message. "I'm in the lobby. Do not make a scene. Come get me." But before I could hit send, movement caught my eye. Over in the far corner of the lobby, near the maintenance access panels, a man was kneeling on the floor. He was wearing a suit that likely cost $5,000, but the jacket was discarded on a chair nearby. His white dress shirt was rolled up to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with tension. He was holding a blueprint in one hand and pointing authoritatively at an exposed section of the wall with the other. It was Julian. I lowered my phone, watching him. 2 maintenance workers in blue jumpsuits were listening to him intently. Julian wasn't yelling. He wasn't posturing. He was working. I moved slightly closer, straining to hear over the din of the lobby. "The heating exchange on the 42nd floor is fluctuating," Julian was saying. His voice low and steady, a baritone that cut through the noise. "I don't care what the budget report says. If the tenants are cold, we fix it. Replace the valve. I will sign off on the override myself." "But Mr. Sterling said to cut costs on maintenance this quarter," one of the workers replied nervously. "He said the old valves would hold until spring." Julian stood up, wiping dust from his hands onto a handkerchief. His face tightened. "Mr. Sterling is not freezing in his office. The tenants are— Do it. If Liam has a problem with the expenditure, send him to me." A small, sad smile touched my lips. That was Julian. While the receptionist was playing gatekeeper, and Liam was apparently cutting corners on heat to save a few pennies, Julian was on his knees on the marble floor, making sure the building actually functioned. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes that I could see even from 20 feet away. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the entire world on his shoulders. The contrast was heartbreaking. The glitz of the lobby, the rudeness of the front desk, and there, in the corner, the only ounce of integrity left in the building, fighting a losing battle against a broken heating system. I felt a sudden urge to run to him, to tell him I was back, to tell him he didn't have to carry it alone anymore. I watched as he put his jacket back on, adjusting his cufflinks with precise mechanical movements. He looked lonely, surrounded by hundreds of people. He looked completely and utterly alone. I was just about to step out from behind the pillar, to call his name, when the atmosphere in the lobby shifted. It wasn't a subtle shift, it was a tear. The revolving doors spun aggressively, and a high-pitched, piercing sound cut through the ambient noise of the lobby like a jagged knife. Oh my God. You guys, can you believe the lighting in here? It is absolutely perfect for the aesthetic. Say hi to my babies. The voice was shrill, dripping with a forced, sugary enthusiasm that set my teeth on edge. It was the kind of voice that demanded attention, not because it had anything important to say, but because it simply refused to be ignored. I froze, pulling back into the shadows. From the entrance, a whirlwind of color and noise burst into the serene gray of the lobby. I didn't see her face clearly yet, but I saw the phone held high on a selfie stick, the ring light attached to it blindingly bright. I saw the oversized coffee cup held dangerously loose in one manicured hand. And I felt, with a sinking intuition that comes from years of surviving in a shark tank, that my quiet return was about to become very, very loud. The peaceful observation was over. The storm had just walked in. If the lobby of Larkspur Tower was a cathedral of silence and power, then Bella Sinclair was the barbarian storming the gates, armed not with a sword, but with a rose-gold iPhone and a terrifying lack of self-awareness. I watched her approach from the shadows of the pillar. She did not walk. She strutted. It was a performance, a choreographed movement designed entirely for the 6-inch screen held aloft in her right hand. She was young, perhaps 22, with hair bleached to a blinding platinum blonde and styled in loose, beachy waves that looked entirely out of place in a Chicago business district in late autumn. She wore a skirt that was pushing the boundaries of the corporate dress code, paired with a fluffy cropped sweater that looked more expensive than my first car. She was the definition of an influencer, a creature of the digital age who existed in 2 realities simultaneously, the physical world, which she seemed to view as a mere backdrop, and the digital world, where she was the main character. "Okay, you guys, so I am literally walking into the office right now." She chirped at her phone, her voice amplified by the cavernous acoustics of the lobby. "The grind never stops. Right? I have this massive meeting with the creative team later. We are reshaping the entire brand identity. It is exhausting being a boss, babe, but someone has to do it. I frowned. Brand identity. She was an intern. I remembered her application. It had come across my desk 4 months ago, flagged only because her father was a mid-level supplier we used for office furniture. I had approved the internship as a favor, assuming she would be fetching coffee and filing papers. Apparently, in her mind, she was running the company. She was moving fast, walking backward now to get the perfect angle of the chandelier behind her, spinning slightly to ensure her ring light caught the sparkle in her eyes. In her left hand, she held a plastic cup the size of a small bucket, filled with an iced coffee that swirled with caramel and cream. I stayed still. I was standing in the dead zone of the lobby, a space between the decorative ficus plants and the marble column that guided traffic toward the VIP elevators. It was not a walkway. No one had any reason to walk through this specific square footage unless they were inspecting the marble. But Bella Sinclair was not looking where she was going. She was looking at herself. And oh my God, look at these floors. I can literally see The collision was inevitable. It happened in slow motion, yet it was over in a heartbeat. She spun around, her eyes locked on her screen, and plowed directly into me. For a second, there was just the physical shock of impact, the thud of a body hitting a body. Then came the cold. The lid of her oversized cup popped off with a treacherous ease. A tidal wave of ice, milk, espresso, and sticky caramel syrup erupted from the container. It did not just splash. It drenched. The liquid hit my chest like a freezing hammer, soaking instantly into the thick cotton of my gray hoodie. It cascaded down my front, splashing onto my thighs, seeping through my worn denim jeans, and pooling in my muddy sneakers. The cold was shocking, stealing the breath from my lungs. The smell of artificial sugar and burnt coffee filled my nose, overpowering the scent of the lobby's fresh lilies. "Oh my God!" Bella shrieked. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated horror. But as I looked up, wiping a streak of brown liquid from my chin, I realized with a sinking heart that her horror was not directed at me. She was not looking at the woman she had just soaked. She was looking at her sweater. A single, tiny drop of coffee had landed on her white sleeve. "My cashmere," she wailed, staring at the speck of brown as if it were a bullet wound. "You guys, did you see that my vintage cashmere is ruined?" I stood there, dripping. The cold liquid was already seeping through to my skin, making me shiver. The lobby had gone silent. The receptionists, the security guards, the passing businessmen, everyone had stopped to watch the spectacle. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to wring out my hoodie right there. "You ran into me," I said, my voice calm but hard as granite. Bella looked up then, as if realizing for the first time that the obstacle she had hit was a human being. Her eyes scanned me, starting from my messy bun, down to the coffee-stained hoodie, the ripped leggings, and finally resting on my mud-caked sneakers. Her expression shifted from shock to a sneer of absolute revulsion. She did not apologize. She did not ask if I was burned, or cold, or hurt. She rolled her eyes. "Excuse me," she snapped, the sweetness of her livestream persona evaporating instantly. "I ran into you. You were standing in the middle of the hallway. Do you have any idea how much this coffee cost? It was $8, and now look at my outfit." I stared at her, genuinely baffled by the sheer audacity. "I was standing still," I corrected her, keeping my voice level. "You were walking backward while looking at your phone. You spilled your drink on me. The polite thing to do would be to apologize and perhaps offer me a napkin." Bella laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. She took a step back, raising her phone again, turning the camera so it faced me. "Apologize," she repeated, talking to the screen now, treating me like a prop in her personal drama. "Fam, can you believe this? This random woman just destroys my morning vibe and then demands an apology. Look at her." She thrust the phone into my face, I could see the stream of comments scrolling up the side of the screen at a dizzying speed. There were heart emojis, laughing faces, and words I could barely read. The viewer count in the corner ticked upward, 49,000, then 50,000. 50,000 strangers were currently watching me drip coffee onto the floor of my own building. "Who even are you?" Bella sneered, stepping closer, using her height and her platform heels to loom over me. "Security usually keeps the riffraff out. Did you sneak in through the loading dock? Are you lost? The soup kitchen is 3 blocks over." "Sweetie," the insult was so cliché it almost made me laugh. Almost, but the anger boiling in my gut was too hot for humor. This was the culture Liam had allowed to fester in my absence. A culture where an intern felt comfortable humiliating a stranger, any stranger, regardless of their status, broadcast live to the world. "I am asking you one last time," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. "Put the phone away and apologize. You have ruined my clothes. You have created a disturbance. Act like a professional." "Professional," Bella scoffed. "I am a content creator. This is my job. You wouldn't understand. You look like you have never seen a smartphone before. Are you the new cleaning lady? Is that it? Because if you are doing a terrible job. Look at this mess you made on the floor." She pointed a manicured finger at the puddle of coffee at my feet. The very puddle she had created. "Clean it up," she commanded, her voice ringing with entitlement. "And then get out of my face before I call someone who actually matters." I felt a muscle in my jaw twitch. The urge to speak, to shatter her little world with 5 words, "I am Eva Larkspur," was overwhelming. It would be so easy. I could snap my fingers. And the security guards, standing by the door, would drag her out. I could end her career before it even began. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Julian. He had been watching from the maintenance area, his body tense. When the coffee hit me, he had frozen. But now, as Bella's voice rose in pitch and the insults began to fly, he started to move. He was striding across the lobby, his face a mask of thunderous fury. I knew that look. It was the look he wore before he destroyed a hostile witness in a courtroom. He was coming to save me. He was going to grab Bella by the arm, announce my identity, and demand she be removed. It would be satisfying. It would be swift. But it would be too easy. If Julian intervened now, Bella would just be a clumsy intern who insulted the wrong rich woman. She would be fired, she would cry, and she would move on to another company to poison another well. And more importantly, I would not get to see how deep this rot went. Bella had mentioned a husband. She had mentioned being a boss. She was projecting power she should not have. I needed to know where that power came from. I needed to see if Liam would come to save her. I needed to let the trap snap shut completely. I locked eyes with Julian across the 30 feet of marble that separated us. He was closing in fast, his mouth already opening to shout her name. I made a subtle, almost imperceptible motion with my right hand. I held it flat against my thigh and gave a single, sharp shake of my head. "Stop." Julian faltered. He knew my signals. We had spent a decade communicating across boardrooms without speaking a word. He saw the command in my eyes. "Stand down. Wait." He stopped in his tracks, about 10 feet away, blending into a group of confused tourists. His fists were clenched at his sides, his knuckles white. He looked like he was in physical pain, restraining himself from rushing to my side. But he obeyed. He stood his ground, becoming a witness instead of a participant. I turned my attention back to Bella, who was now busy reading comments off her screen to her audience. User QueenB99 says she looks like she crawled out of a swamp. OMG. You guys are so savage. Bella giggled, flipping her hair. But seriously, someone call security. It smells like wet dog over here. She looked at me again, her lip curling. Are you still here? I told you to leave. You're ruining my lighting. I looked down at my ruined hoodie, feeling the cold seep into my bones. Then I looked up, directly into the camera lens of her phone. I did not blink. You have made a mistake, I said softly. The only mistake is your outfit, Bella retorted, snapping her gum. Now move. My husband is the CEO of this building, and if he sees trash like you loitering in the lobby, he is going to flip out. There it was, the card I was waiting for. Your husband, I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. The CEO? Liam Sterling, she bragged, puffing out her chest. Maybe you have heard of him. Probably not. He is on the cover of magazines, not whatever crumpled newspapers you sleep under. He owns this place. He owns me. And technically, he owns the air you are breathing right now. So stop wasting it. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. It was not a smile of amusement. It was the smile of a hunter who just watched the prey walk willingly into the cage. Is that so? I asked. Well then, I suppose we should get him down here. Bella faltered for a fraction of a second, surprise flickering in her eyes. She hadn't expected the homeless woman to challenge her, but she recovered quickly, doubling down on her bluff. You want me to call him? She laughed, mocking me to her audience. You think he has time for you? He is in a board meeting. He is running an empire. Call him, I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. It was the voice I used to close billion-dollar deals. If he is your husband, surely he will want to protect you from the trash. Bella hesitated. She looked at her phone, then at me. She was trapped in her own performance. She couldn't back down now, not in front of 50,000 people. Fine, she spat, her thumb hovering over her screen. But don't say I didn't warn you. When he comes down here, you are going to jail. I stood tall. Ignoring the coffee dripping from my hem, I adjusted my stance, squaring my shoulders. I am counting on it, I whispered. The stage was set, the audience was watching, and the lead actor was about to make his entrance. I just hoped Liam was ready for the role of a lifetime. You act as though you own the place, I said, my voice cutting through her shrill laughter like a razor blade. Tell me, do you work here? Because this attitude, this blatant lack of respect for others, does not align with the culture of Larkspur Holdings. We do not belittle people. We do not film strangers without their consent. And we certainly do not scream at people when we are the ones who caused the accident. I watched her face closely. I wanted to see if there was any flicker of recognition, any spark of shame. There was none. Instead, her eyes widened with a mix of amusement and genuine disbelief, as if a golden retriever had just tried to lecture her on quantum physics. Bella threw her head back and laughed. It was a loud, performative sound meant for the microphone attached to her phone. Culture, she mocked, stepping closer to me, invading my personal space with the cloying scent of vanilla perfume and stale coffee. You are talking to me about culture. Look at you. You look like you dug your clothes out of a donation bin behind a Goodwill, and you are lecturing me on the corporate culture of a billion-dollar company. She turned back to her phone, winking at the camera. Can you believe this? Guys, the cleaning lady is giving me a performance review. I cannot make this stuff up. I felt a vein in my temple throb. I am asking you a question, I repeated, keeping my tone dangerously even. Are you an employee of this company? Bella stopped laughing. She looked at me with a sudden, sharp coldness. Employee? She spat the word out as if it were an insult. Do not insult me. I am not some 9-to-5 drone who clocks in and out. I am practically the queen of this castle. She paused for effect, waiting for the murmurs of the crowd to die down. The lobby had gone quiet, the ambient noise of business replaced by the hush of scandal. Dozens of phones were now raised, recording us. I could feel the lenses focused on my stained hoodie, documenting my humiliation. I am going to be the mistress of this entire building, Bella declared, her voice ringing off the marble walls. Liam Sterling is not just my boss. He is my husband. The silence that followed was absolute. For a moment, I actually forgot how to breathe. I had expected her to say she was his girlfriend. I had expected her to say they were sleeping together. I had even prepared myself for the possibility that she was pregnant. But this This delusion was so grand, so absolute, that it momentarily stunned me. "Your husband," I repeated, my voice flat. I needed to hear it again. I needed to be absolutely certain that I was not hallucinating. "That is right," Bella said, beaming. She lifted her left hand, wiggling her fingers in front of my face and then in front of her camera lens. "See this? Eat your heart out. Haters." On her ring finger sat a diamond. It was massive. It was a cushion-cut stone that had to be at least 4 carats, surrounded by a halo of smaller diamonds. It caught the light of the chandelier and fractured it into 1,000 sparkling rainbows. I stared at the ring. I knew diamonds. My grandmother had left me a collection that rivaled the crown jewels of small European nations. I narrowed my eyes. Analyzing the stone from a distance, it was too white, too perfect. It lacked the subtle, distinctive fire of a true, high-quality diamond. It looked like cubic zirconia, or perhaps moissanite, or, worst-case scenario, it was real, and Liam had paid for it using the company's discretionary fund money that was supposed to go toward the housing projects I had just spent 3 months sweating over. "He proposed last week," Bella bragged, stroking the ring. "We are keeping it hush-hush until the divorce with his ex is finalized. You know, the old hag he was stuck with, apparently. She is some frigid workaholic who is never around. He was so lonely until he met me." I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the iced coffee. The old hag, the frigid workaholic. Was that how Liam described me to this child? Was that how he justified his betrayal by painting me as a villain in my own life story? "And that is not all," Bella continued. Clearly enjoying the attention, she was feeding off the energy of the crowd, preening like a peacock. "Next week, everything changes. Liam is firing the current creative team. They are all too old. They do not get the vibe. He is promoting me to creative director. I am going to rebrand everything. Pink logos, more social engagement. We are going to make Larkspur fun." I felt bile rise in my throat. Creative director. That position was currently held by Sarah Jenkins, a woman with 2 master's degrees and 20 years of experience who had built our brand from the ground up. Liam was going to fire Sarah to give the job to a 22-year-old who used the word vibe as a business metric. This was not just adultery. This was corporate suicide. "You really think," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "that the board of directors is going to allow an intern with 0 experience to run the creative department of a Fortune 500 company?" Bella rolled her eyes. "The board, Liam controls the board. He told me so. He says they are just a bunch of old men who sign whatever he puts in front of them. He is the king, and that makes me the queen." She stepped closer to me again, her expression shifting from boastful to menacing. She looked me up and down, her nose wrinkling in disgust. "And as the queen," she hissed, "my first act is going to be getting rid of trash like you. I do not know how you got past security, but you are done, finished. I am going to tell Liam to fire you. I do not care if you scrub the toilets or empty the trash bins. You are out on the street, today." She turned to the crowd, raising her voice. "You guys hear that? This is what happens when you disrespect me. You lose your job. You lose everything." She looked back at me, a smirk playing on her lips. "I will make sure you never work in this zip code again. I will put your face on the do not enter list. You will be lucky if you can get a job scrubbing floors at a gas station in Gary, Indiana." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the heavy makeup cracking slightly around her smile lines. I saw the desperation in her eyes as she glanced constantly at her viewer count, seeking validation from strangers. She was not a queen. She was a child playing dress-up in a burning house. But what truly sickened me was not her cruelty. It was the reflection of my husband that I saw in her. Liam had chosen this. He had looked at this vapid, cruel, narcissistic display of ignorance and thought, "Yes, this is what I want." He had traded a partnership based on intellect and shared vision for a trophy that live-streamed her own stupidity. It was an insult to my intelligence. It was an insult to the decade of hard work we had put into this company. "You are going to have me fired," I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. "Snap of my fingers," Bella said, snapping her fingers in my face. "Gone. And you are going to ban me from the building." "Forever," she confirmed. "Because you are the wife of the CEO." "Exactly," she preened. "Now you are getting it. Took you long enough." I nodded slowly. The anger had crystallized into something sharp and cold, like a diamond, but much harder. I reached into the pocket of my sodden hoodie. When I pulled out my phone, Bella actually laughed out loud. "Oh my God," she shrieked, zooming her camera in on my device. "Look at that. Is that an iPhone 6? And look at the screen. It is shattered. Can you even make calls on that thing? Or do you just use it as a paperweight?" The screen of my phone was indeed a spiderweb of cracks. I had dropped it on a rock face while climbing a ridge to inspect a potential landslide risk near our proposed building site in West Virginia. It was a battle scar. To Bella, it was a mark of poverty. "It works well enough for my purposes," I said calmly. "Who are you going to call?" she taunted. "Your manager at the cleaning company. Ask them to bring a mop." I unlocked the screen. My thumb hovered over the contact list. I did not search for customer service. I did not search for security. I went straight to the favorites list. There were only 3 people on that list. Julian Vance, my father whose number I could not bring myself to delete, even though he had been gone for 5 years, and Liam Sterling. I pressed the call button. "No," I said, looking up from the phone to lock eyes with her. "I am going to save you the trouble. You said you wanted to tell your husband about me. You said you wanted him to come down here and handle the trash." I held the phone up. The speaker was on. The ringing sound echoed loud and clear in the silent lobby. Ring Bella looked confused. Her smirk faltered slightly. She lowered her phone just an inch. "Who are you calling?" "I am calling the CEO," I said, my voice ringing with a power that finally made her take a step back. "I am calling Liam. Let's get him down here. I want to hear him say it to my face. I want to see him introduce his wife to the woman standing in front of you." Ring. The crowd held its breath. Julian, in the distance, took a step forward, his face grim. The receptionist stopped chewing her gum. "You have his number," Bella stammered, a flicker of doubt crossing her eyes. "Why do you have his number?" "Oh, honey," I said, and for the first time, I smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You have no idea who I am. But you are about to find out." The line clicked. The ringing stopped. A familiar voice filled the air. Amplified by the speakerphone, it was breathless, irritated, and undeniably Liam. "Hello, Eva." "Why are you calling me? I thought you were in the mountains." Bella's face went white. The color drained from her cheeks so fast it looked like a physical blow. She recognized the voice, but more importantly, she heard the name, Eva. She looked at me, her eyes widening in horror as the pieces began to click together, but it was too late. The trap was sprung. The game was on. And I was done playing by the rules. The ringing tone of a cell phone is a sound we all know. It is a digital trill, a mundane electronic pulse that usually signifies nothing more than a casual conversation or a telemarketer. But in that cavernous, marble-clad lobby, amplified by the speaker of my battered device, each ring sounded like a gavel striking a judge's bench. Ring. The sound echoed off the vaulted ceiling, bouncing back to us with a hollow clarity. I held the phone flat on my palm, extending my arm slightly so the microphone would pick up everything. I wanted there to be no ambiguity. I wanted the 50,000 people watching Bella's live stream and the 100 or so people standing in the lobby to hear every single syllable. Ring. Bella stood frozen. Her hand, the one holding her own phone, had dropped slightly, but the camera was still rolling. She looked at my screen, her eyes darting between the cracked glass and my face. I could see the gears in her mind grinding against each other, throwing sparks of confusion. She recognized the number. She had probably texted it 5 minutes ago. But the name on the screen, the simple, unadorned contact name, was messing with her reality. To her, Liam was a god, a lover, a ticket to fame. To me, he was a contact I had not deleted yet. Ring. Why was he not answering? I knew Liam's schedule better than he did. If he were truly in a board meeting, as Bella had claimed, his phone would be off, diverted to his executive assistant, a formidable woman named Margaret, who would never let a call through unless the building was on fire. The fact that it was ringing meant his phone was on. It meant he was accessible. And it meant he was not in a meeting with the board. "He is not going to pick up," Bella scoffed, her voice trembling slightly, trying to regain her footing. "He is busy running the world. He does not have time for—" Click, the ringing stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was heavy, pressurized, like the air before a tornado touches down. "Ava." The voice was unmistakable. It was Liam Sterling, but it was not the smooth baritone voice he used for press conferences or shareholder meetings. It was tight, high-pitched. It was the voice of a man who had been caught off guard, a man who was scrambling to assemble a persona before the audience saw him. A collective gasp swept through the lobby. It was a soft sound, like wind rustling through dry leaves. Everyone recognized that voice. They heard it at the annual Christmas party. They heard it on the company podcasts. I watched Bella, her face, previously flushed with the excitement of her performance, drained of color entirely. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared at the speaker of my phone as if it were a venomous snake. "Hello, Liam," I said. My voice was calm, almost pleasant. It was the voice I used when I was about to reject a merger offer that was insultingly low. There was a pause on the other end, a rustling of papers, a cough. He was buying time. "I was not expecting you to call," Liam said, his voice gaining a little more artificial strength, trying to project authority. "I thought you were still in Appalachia. The signal there is terrible. Is everything all right? You are calling my private line during business hours." "I am," I replied, keeping my eyes locked on Bella's terrified face. "Am I interrupting something?" "Well, yes, actually," Liam said, letting out a heavy, martyred sigh. "I am in the middle of a critical session with the board of directors. We are discussing the merger with the Omni Group. It is incredibly delicate. Eva, tensions are high. I really cannot be chatting about domestic issues right now. Can this wait until you are back in the city on Friday?" The lie was so smooth, so practiced. If I had been in West Virginia, standing on a muddy hill with poor reception, I might have believed him. I might have felt guilty for bothering him. I might have apologized and hung up, leaving him free to continue his day. But I was not in West Virginia, and neither was the board of directors. I knew for a fact that the chairman of the board was currently in Tokyo for a golf tournament, and the quarterly merger review was not scheduled until next month. "A board meeting," I repeated, my tone dripping with dry amusement. "That sounds intense. Are you in the main conference room?" "Yes, of course," Liam snapped, his patience fraying. "Where else would I be? Look, Eva, I have 12 people staring at me right now waiting for my vote. I have to go. We are building the future of this company, and I need to focus." "The future," I echoed. "Is that what we are calling it now?" I took a step closer to Bella. She was shaking. Her hand holding the phone was vibrating so hard the image on her live stream must have been a blur. She looked at me, pleading silently with her eyes, begging me to stop, begging for this to be a nightmare she could wake up from. "Liam," I said, dropping the pleasantry. My voice hardened into steel. "Are you really in a meeting, or are you perhaps busy buying designer handbags for your new wife?" The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was not the silence of a dropped call. It was the silence of a man who has just realized he stepped onto a landmine, and he is waiting for the click. "What?" Liam whispered. The arrogance was gone. The CEO persona had evaporated, leaving behind just a frightened man. "What did you just say?" "You heard me?" I said, enunciating every word clearly. Your wife? The one you promised to make creative director next week, the one wearing a 4-carat ring that I assume was purchased with the funds we allocated for the Veterans Housing Project. That wife? Eva. You are being hysterical, Liam stammered. His voice was rising in pitch, cracking around the edges. I do not know what you are talking about. Someone has been feeding you lies. I am working myself to the bone for us, for our legacy. Is that right? I asked. Then explain to me why this young woman standing in front of me, a Miss Bella Sinclair, I believe is currently broadcasting to 50,000 people that she is the new Mrs. Sterling. On the other end of the line, I heard a sharp intake of breath. Then, a thud. It sounded like a fist hitting a desk, or perhaps a heavy book being dropped. Bella let out a small whimper. She looked at the phone in my hand as if it were a bomb. She shook her head frantically at me, mouthing the word no, but she was powerless to stop the train wreck she had engineered. Bella. Liam's voice came through, strangled and weak. Is Bella there? She is, I confirmed. She is standing right here in the lobby. In fact, she just introduced herself to me in a rather memorable way. She walked into me, spilled a very large, very sticky coffee all over my clothes, and then informed me that her husband, Liam, would have me fired and arrested for loitering. Oh, God, Liam moaned. It was a sound of pure misery. She called me trash, I continued, relentlessly. She called me a homeless person, and she assured her 50,000 viewers that she is the queen of Larkspur Tower and that I am about to be thrown out on the street by her loving husband. Eva, listen to me, Liam said, speaking faster now, the panic fully setting in. She is confused. She is an intern. She has some mental health issues. I have been trying to help her. It is a mentorship program. She misconstrued my kindness. You know how these young people are today. They imagine things. I looked at Bella. Her jaw dropped. The betrayal on her face was almost tragic. She had expected him to defend her. She had expected him to roar down the phone and demand respect for his mistress. Instead, he was throwing her to the wolves without a second thought, labeling her as crazy to save his own skin. She has a mental issue, I asked, raising an eyebrow at Bella. She seems quite lucid to me. Liam. She was very specific about the ring, and the apartment, and the fact that you called me a frigid workaholic who is never around. I never said that, Liam screamed. The sound distorted over the speakerphone, a harsh scratch of static. I never said that, Eva. You have to believe me. This is a setup. Who is this girl? I barely know her. Liar. The scream came from beside me. It was Bella. She couldn't take it anymore. The humiliation of being denied, of being called a charity case with mental issues, broke through her fear. She leaned into my phone, shouting at the speaker. You liar. You told me you loved me. You told me last night that she was a boring old hag, and you were just waiting for the lawyers to draft the papers. You gave me the corporate credit card to buy this outfit. Do not pretend you do not know me. Liam Sterling. The lobby exploded with whispers. The camera phones were held higher. This was better than any soap opera. This was the raw, bloody dismantling of a reputation in real time. Bella, shut up, Liam roared back. Shut up, you stupid girl. That is enough, I cut in, my voice icy. I am done listening to this. I am done with the lies. I am done with the excuses. Ava, please, Liam begged. Let me explain. Just come up to the office. We can talk about this privately. Just you and me. Please, do not do this in the lobby. No, I said. I am not coming up. You are coming down. What? You heard me, I commanded. Get out of your fake meeting, get out of your office, and come down to the lobby, right now. Ava, I can't, I have calls. If you are not down here in 2 minutes, I said, looking at the security guards who were watching the scene with wide eyes. I am going to assume you have vacated your position as CEO, and I will let Julian handle the transition. And Liam, I will also hand over the recordings of this call to the divorce attorneys. No, Eva, wait. 2 minutes. Liam, the clock is ticking. Come meet your wife. Both of them. I didn't hang up. I just lowered the phone slightly, keeping the line open. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence from the speaker. Then, we heard it. Crash. It was the distinct, violent sound of an expensive ergonomic leather chair being shoved backward and toppling over. Then came the footsteps. Thud, 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 thud. Heavy, frantic footsteps running across a hardwood floor. Then the sound of a heavy door being wrenched open and slamming against a wall. "He is coming," I said to the room at large. Bella stood there, trembling. Her face was a mask of ruined mascara and terror, but even now, in the depths of her panic, I could see a flicker of delusion in her eyes. She heard him running. She heard the desperation, and a small, twisted part of her still believed that he was running to her. She still believed that when he arrived, he would see her crying, and his love would conquer his fear of me. She thought he was rushing to be her knight in shining armor. Poor, stupid girl. He was not running to save her. He was running to save himself. I turned slowly to face Bella's phone, which was still broadcasting. I looked directly into the lens, addressing the 50,000 silent witnesses. "Do not turn it off," I said softly to the camera. "You wanted a show. You wanted to see the life of the rich and famous keep watching. Do not touch that button. Let the whole world see this family reunion." I folded my arms across my coffee-stained chest and turned my gaze toward the VIP elevator bank. The numbers above the gold doors began to count down. 50, 49, 48. He was coming down fast, but he could not outrun the truth. It was waiting for him right here. In the lobby of the tower, he thought he ruled, wearing a muddy hoodie and a face of stone. The digital numbers above the gold-plated elevator doors ticked down with agonizing slowness. 40, 30, 20. The entire lobby had fallen into a hush that felt less like a pause in business and more like the intake of breath before an execution. The only sound was the faint whir of the ventilation system and the rapid, shallow breathing of the girl standing next to me. Bella Sinclair was vibrating with a cocktail of adrenaline and fear. She was still holding her phone up, but her arm was shaking so badly that her live stream must have looked like footage from an earthquake. She kept glancing at the elevator, then at me, her eyes wide and wet. She was terrified. Yes, but beneath the terror, I could see the ember of hope still burning. She truly believed that the man descending from the sky was coming to rescue her. She believed that her youth, her beauty, and their secret nights in that apartment were currency enough to buy his loyalty. She did not understand that men like Liam Sterling do not have loyalty. They have interests. And right now, his interests were about to collide violently with his reality. Ping, the soft chime of the elevator arrival sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. The heavy brass doors slid open smoothly, revealing the plush, mirrored interior of the executive car. Liam Sterling burst out of the elevator before the doors were even fully retracted. If I had painted a portrait of guilt, it would have looked exactly like the man who stumbled into the lobby. Liam was usually impeccable. He was a man who spent $2,000 on facials and tailored his suits to within a millimeter of perfection. But the man who ran toward us now looked like he had been chased through a wind tunnel. His face was slick with sweat, beads of perspiration rolling down his temples and soaking into the collar of his white dress shirt. His tie, a silk crimson piece I had bought him for our anniversary, was loosened and skewed to the left. His chest was heaving, his breath coming in jagged gasps that echoed in the silence. He ran 2 steps, his expensive loafers slipping slightly on the polished marble, and then he froze. He saw us. He saw the tableau that I had so carefully arranged for him. On one side, there was Bella, the embodiment of his reckless indulgence, dressed in trendy, expensive clothes paid for with stolen money, clutching her phone like a lifeline. On the other side, there was me, his wife, the woman whose name was on the deed to the building. I was standing with my arms crossed over my chest, my posture rigid, my clothes stained dark brown with coffee and sugar, my hair a mess of wind-blown strands. Liam looked from Bella to me, and for a second, His brain seemed to short-circuit. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. The color drained from his face so completely that his skin took on the gray, pasty hue of uncooked dough. He looked at the coffee stains on my hoodie. He looked at the mud on my shoes, and then he looked into my eyes. I did not blink. I did not smile. I simply stared at him with the cold, dispassionate regard of a judge looking at a repeat offender. "Liam." The cry broke the standoff. Bella, unable to read the room or the sheer terror radiating off her lover, mistook his hesitation for confusion. She dropped her phone to her side, though she did not end the stream, and threw herself at him. "Oh my God! Liam, finally!" she wailed, her voice pitching up into a childish whine. She latched onto his arm, pressing her body against his side, trying to reclaim the intimacy she felt entitled to. "You have to help me. This woman is crazy. She has been harassing me, and she grabbed my phone, and she made up all these lies about you." Liam stood rigid, his eyes still locked on mine. He was trembling. I could see the tremors running through his hands. "Tell her." "Liam," Bella demanded, shaking his arm, oblivious to the fact that she was clinging to a sinking ship. "Tell everyone who I am. Tell security to throw this trash out on the street. She ruined my cashmere sweater. Liam, she ruined it." The sound of her voice seemed to snap Liam out of his paralysis, but it did not trigger the protective instinct she was hoping for. Instead, it triggered the survival instinct of a cornered animal. He looked down at Bella, and the expression on his face was not love, it was not even lust, it was pure, unadulterated hatred. She was the evidence of his crime, and she was currently screaming his guilt to the entire world. "Get off me!" Liam roared. The violence of his reaction shocked everyone, myself included. He didn't just pull away. He shoved her. He took both hands and pushed Bella backward with enough force that she stumbled on her platform heels. Her arms flailed, grasping at the air, before she crashed hard onto the marble floor, landing in a heap of tulle and expensive fabric. "Liam," Bella whispered, looking up from the floor, her eyes wide with shock. The betrayal was so sudden, so absolute, that she couldn't process it. "Baby?" "Do not call me that," Liam screamed, his voice cracking. He pointed a shaking finger at her, his face contorted with rage. "Shut your mouth, you stupid, ignorant girl. Do you have any idea what you have done? Do you have any idea who you are talking to?" The lobby erupted in a low murmur of shock. Phones were raised higher. This was the plot twist no one saw coming. The Prince Charming had just pushed Cinderella into the mud. Bella flinched as if he had struck her. Tears began to spill down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. But you said you loved me," she sobbed, her voice small and broken. "You said I was going to be the creative director. You said she was a hag." "I said shut up," Liam bellowed, turning his back on her completely. He turned toward me. The transition was instant and terrifying. The rage vanished from his face, replaced by a desperate, fawning pleading that made my stomach turn. He took a step toward me, his hands held out in a gesture of surrender. Then, to the astonishment of the 100 people watching, Liam Sterling, the CEO of Larkspur Holdings, dropped to his knees. He didn't just kneel. He collapsed. He hit the floor with a thud that must have bruised his kneecaps. Ignoring the hardness of the stone, he shuffled forward on his knees, reaching out to take my hand. His palms were sweaty, clammy against my skin. "Eva," he choked out, his voice trembling. "Eva, honey, oh my God, you are back. You are actually back." I looked down at him. From this angle, I could see the thinning spot on the top of his head that he usually combed his hair over to hide. I could see the sweat staining the armpits of his shirt. He looked small. He looked pathetic. He tried to grab my hand, the one that was sticky with dried coffee. "Why didn't you tell me I would have sent the car? I would have sent the helicopter. You shouldn't have come in like this. Look at you. You are a mess. We need to get you upstairs. We need to get you cleaned up." I did not move. I did not pull my hand away immediately. I let him hold it, let him feel the grime and the coldness of my skin. I wanted him to feel the reality of what he had done. A mess, I repeated, my voice quiet but carrying clearly in the silent room. Yes, Liam, I suppose I am a mess. I was just assaulted by a member of your staff. A staff member who claims to be your wife. Liam flinched. He squeezed my hand tighter, as if he could physically squeeze the words out of existence. No, 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 he stammered, shaking his head frantically. Sweat flew from his forehead. Ava, please, do not listen to her. It is a misunderstanding, a terrible, horrible misunderstanding. I slowly pulled my hand from his grip. I did it deliberately, peeling my fingers away one by one, wiping my palm on my jeans as if I had touched something unclean. The gesture was a rejection more powerful than any slap. A misunderstanding, I said flatly. So, the ring is a misunderstanding. The apartment is a misunderstanding. The promise of a directorship is a misunderstanding. I pointed to Bella, who was still sitting on the floor, weeping silently, watching us with the devastation of a child whose parents are divorcing. She called you husband, Liam. She called me trash. She said you were divorcing me because I was a frigid workaholic. Are those misunderstandings? Liam looked at me, his eyes darting back and forth, searching for a lie that would stick. He was sweating so profusely now that he looked like he was melting. He realized that the board meeting lie had failed. He realized the wrong number lie wouldn't work. So he did what cowards always do. He blamed the victim. He turned halfway toward Bella, just enough so I could see his profile, and lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, loud enough for the cameras to catch. Ava, listen to me, he pleaded, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. She is not well. She is a stalker, Bella gasped. What? She is a fan, Liam continued, speaking faster, building the lie, brick by brick. She is obsessed with me, with the company. We hired her as an intern, and she started imagining things. She follows me around. She buys fake rings and pretends we are married. I felt sorry for her. I was trying to let her down gently without causing a scene. I was trying to get her help. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and imploring. You know how charitable I am, Ava. You know I have a soft spot for people in need. I was just trying to manage her delusion until we could get professionals involved. I never touched her. I swear on my mother's grave, Ava, I never touched her. It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't seen the credit card statements that Julian had sent me 3 weeks ago showing purchases at Tiffany's and a rental agreement for a penthouse in the Gold Coast signed by Liam, I might have hesitated. He sounded so convincing. He sounded like a benevolent leader burdened by a crazy employee. But I had the statements, and I had eyes. Bella let out a scream that was raw and guttural. You lying bastard! She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the pain in her ankle. She held up her phone, which was still recording. A stalker! She shrieked, aiming the camera at Liam's kneeling form. You slept in my bed last night. You forgot your watch on my nightstand. I have the photos. Liam, I have the texts. I have the video of you dancing in your underwear in my kitchen. She turned the phone screen toward me, and then toward the crowd. Look at this. On the screen, clear as day, was a photo of Liam Sterling. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing a silk robe, holding a glass of champagne, standing on the balcony of an apartment that was definitely not our marital home. He was laughing, looking at the camera with a look of adoration. Liam saw the photo. The last vestige of his defense crumbled. He slumped forward, his hands hitting the floor, his head hanging low between his shoulders. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I looked down at the top of his head. I felt a strange detachment. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of building this company together. I had thought we were partners. I had thought we were a team. But looking at him now, a groveling, lying, spineless man who would throw a young girl under the bus to save his own reputation, I realized I was mourning a man who never existed. The Liam I loved was a fiction. This sweating, trembling creature on the floor was the reality. "So," I said, my voice cutting through Bella's sobbing and the crowd's murmurs, "she is a stalker who somehow has photos of you in your robe in her apartment." Liam did not answer. He just breathed, heavy, ragged breaths. "Stand up," I commanded. He didn't move. I said, "Stand up, Liam," I repeated, sharper this time. "You look ridiculous, and you are staining the knees of a $3,000 suit." Slowly, painfully, Liam pushed himself up. He wobbled, his legs unsteady. He brushed off his knees automatically, a reflex of vanity that survived even in his ruin. He couldn't meet my eyes. He looked at my shoulder, at the wall, anywhere but at me. "Ava," he whispered, his voice a husk, "we can fix this, please. Just not here, not in front of them." "Fix this?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You want to fix the fact that your mistress just humiliated me in my own lobby? Or do you want to fix the fact that you lied to me about a board meeting? Or perhaps you want to fix the fact that you claimed I was a frigid hag to a 22-year-old intern?" "I was drunk," Liam blurted out. "I was stressed. The market has been volatile. I didn't mean any of it. It was just talk. Eva locker room talk. It meant nothing." "It meant nothing to you," I corrected him. "Clearly." I glanced at Bella, who was now sobbing into her hands, her world shattered. "But I think it meant a great deal to her, and I can assure you, Liam, it means a great deal to me." I took a step closer to him. The smell of his expensive cologne mixed with the sour scent of fear was suffocating. "You asked her a question before you pushed her," I said softly. "You asked her if she knew who she was talking to." Liam swallowed hard. Adam's apple bobbed. "I think it is time we answered that question," I said. "Because clearly, she thinks she is the wife of the owner. And clearly, you think you are the owner." I turned to the crowd. I saw the faces of my employees. I saw the receptionists, the security guards, the delivery people. I saw Julian standing near the elevators, his face grim, holding a thick folder in his hands. "Julian," I called out. Julian stepped forward immediately. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. He walked with a purpose, his eyes fixed on Liam with a look of cold contempt. "Yes, Eva," Julian said, his voice steady and grounding. "Do you have the documents?" I asked. "I do," Julian replied, lifting the heavy folder. Liam looked at the folder, and for the first time, genuine terror, not just social embarrassment, but legal terror flashed in his eyes. He knew Julian. He knew that Julian never bluffed, and he knew that if Julian was handing me a folder in the middle of the lobby, it wasn't a birthday card. "What is that?" Liam whispered. "The truth," I said. "Something you haven't spoken in a very long time." I reached out and took the folder from Julian. It was heavy. It felt like a weapon in my hands. "You told Bella that this was a misunderstanding," I said to Liam. "Let's clear it up. Right now." The silence that had gripped the lobby was shattered by a scream that was equal parts heartbreak and fury. Bella Sinclair was not going to go quietly into the night. She had been humiliated, pushed to the ground, and discarded like a used wrapper by the man she thought was her prince. The survival instinct that had driven her to climb the social ladder suddenly kicked into overdrive. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the rip in her expensive stocking and the mascara streaking down her face. She pointed a manicured finger, which was trembling violently, directly at Liam's face. "You are a liar!" she screamed. Her voice cracked, raw with emotion, echoing off the high marble walls. "Do not stand there and tell her I am a stalker. Do not dare." Last night. Just last night. Liam, you were in my bed. You were in the apartment on the 42nd floor of the Millennium Tower, the one you bought for me 2 weeks ago. The crowd gasped. The Millennium Tower was one of the most exclusive addresses in Chicago. Bella turned to the camera, grabbing her phone from where she had dropped it on a bench, thrusting it back into the air. She was addressing her audience now, the 50,000 invisible judges in the cloud. desperate to salvage her own reputation by destroying his. "He told me he loved me," she sobbed, the tears flowing freely now. "He told me that his wife was a ghost. He said she was an old, out-of-touch woman who spent all her time playing in the mud with poor people while he did the real work. He promised me he swore on his life that he was filing for divorce this coming Monday. He said he wanted a wife who knew how to shine." Liam looked like he had been slapped. He opened his mouth to interrupt, but Bella was screaming over him, her voice rising to a fever pitch. "You bought me the car," she yelled. "The white Porsche Cayenne. It is parked in the garage right now. Is that a stalker's car?" "Liam, did I hallucinate the keys you put in my hand? Did I hallucinate the weekend in Cabo when you told me I was the only thing that made you feel alive?" The mention of Cabo San Lucas made Liam flinch physically. He looked at me, panic wild in his eyes. "Ava, no," he stammered, holding his hands up. "She is lying. It is all lies. I was at a conference in San Diego that weekend. You saw the itinerary." I looked at him. I looked at the sweat dripping from his chin. I looked at the man I had trusted with my legacy. "San Diego," I repeated slowly. "Yes, I remember the itinerary. You sent me photos of the hotel room." "Exactly." Liam seized on this, a desperate hope lighting up his face. "I was working. I was securing the West Coast expansion." I turned my head slightly to the left, toward the elevators where Julian Vance was standing. He had been waiting for this moment. He had been waiting for 10 years. I suspected, to protect me from the mistake I had made when I said, "I do" to Liam Sterling. Julian stepped forward. He did not run. He walked with the heavy, inevitable cadence of justice. In his hands, he held a thick black leather folder. It was bulging with documents. He stopped beside me, not looking at Liam, but looking at me with a profound, quiet respect. He held the folder out. "The San Diego file." "Ava," Julian said. His voice was low, meant only for me, but in the silence of the lobby, it carried like a bell. "And the Cabo file, and the apartment deed, it is all here." I took the folder. It was heavy. It felt like holding a brick. Liam stared at the folder. He recognized the seal on the front. It was from the private investigation firm we used for corporate espionage countermeasures. He realized, in that split second, that he had not been hiding anything. He had been performing on a stage where I controlled the lighting. "Ava," Liam whispered, "do not open that." I didn't open it. I looked him dead in the eye, and I threw the folder onto the floor. It hit the polished marble with a loud slap. The clasp burst open, hundreds of photographs, bank statements, and flight logs spilled out, sliding across the slick floor like a deck of cards. They scattered at Liam's feet. They scattered at Bella's feet. They drifted toward the camera phone that was still live streaming. The photos were glossy and high definition. There was one of Liam and Bella clinking champagne glasses on the deck of a yacht. There was one of them kissing on the tarmac next to the company's private Gulfstream jet. There was a copy of a bank transfer for $4 million. "Look at them," I commanded, my voice rising, filling the cavernous space. "Look at the work you were doing in San Diego." Liam looked down. He couldn't help it. The evidence was carpeting the floor around him. "You took the company jet," I said, my voice cold and hard as iron. "You told the board you were flying to a sustainability summit. Instead, you flew your mistress to a 5-star resort in Mexico. You billed the fuel, the pilot, and the landing fees to Larkspur Holdings. It was a business expense," Liam croaked, grasping at straws. "She was a consultant." "A consultant," I laughed. A harsh, humorless sound. I pointed to a document that had slid near my sneaker. It was a deed transfer. "And this, the apartment in Millennium Tower. $4 million. Did you think I wouldn't notice $4 million missing from the accounts?" Liam went white. "I was going to pay it back. It was a loan." "It was not a loan," I cut him off. "I traced the funds. Liam, you did not take that money from the operating budget. You were too smart for that. You knew the CFO would flag it." I took a step closer to him, letting my anger finally surface, hot and righteous. "You took it from the Larkspur Hope Foundation," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You stole $4 million from the charity fund. That money was earmarked for the homeless shelter in the South Side. It was meant to buy beds, food, and medicine for veterans and single mothers. And you used it to buy a penthouse for your girlfriend so you could play house." The crowd gasped again. Louder this time. Adultery was a scandal. Stealing from charity was a crime. It was a moral stain that no amount of PR could wash away. Bella looked down at the photos. She saw the bank statement. She saw the source of the funds. Even she, in her vanity, seemed sickened. She looked at Liam with a dawn of realization. He hadn't just spoiled her. He had made her an accessory to a crime. "You stole it," Bella whispered. "You told me it was your bonus," Liam snapped. The pressure was too much. The walls were closing in. He had been exposed as a liar, a cheater, and a thief in the span of 5 minutes. He couldn't attack me. I was the source of his power. He couldn't attack Julian. Julian was too formidable, so he turned on the weakest link. He turned on the mirror that was reflecting his own ugliness back at him. "You shut your mouth!" Liam screamed, his face twisting into a mask of pure violence. He lunged at Bella. He raised his hand, his palm open, swinging wildly. He wanted to hurt her. He wanted to silence the voice that was narrating his destruction. Bella screamed and flinched, closing her eyes, bracing for the impact. But the blow never landed. Julian Vance moved with a speed that belied his calm demeanor. He stepped in between them, intercepting Liam's arm in midair. Julian caught Liam's wrist in a grip that looked effortless, but must have been crushing. Everything froze. Liam struggled, trying to yank his arm back, but Julian did not budge. Julian stood like a statue, his face completely impassive, holding the CEO of the company like an unruly child. "I would not do that, Liam," Julian said. His voice was quiet, but it had a terrifying edge to it. "Assaulting a witness in front of 50 witnesses and a live stream, you are already looking at 5 years for embezzlement. Do not add battery to the list." Julian shoved Liam back. Liam stumbled, losing his balance, and fell back against the reception desk. He panted, clutching his wrist, looking around wildly. He looked at the security guards, expecting them to help him. "Security," Liam barked, trying to regain some shred of authority. "Remove these people. Remove him. I am the CEO. I gave you an order." The 3 security guards standing by the revolving doors did not move. They looked at Liam, then they looked at me. They folded their arms. Liam stared at them, betrayal written all over his face. "I pay your salaries. Do your jobs." "Actually," I said, stepping into the center of the room. "You do not?" I looked at Bella, who was shaking in Julian's shadow. I looked at the receptionist, who was now standing up, looking terrified. I looked into the lens of Bella's phone, and finally, I looked at Liam. "You seem to be under a significant misapprehension regarding the ownership of this company," I said. "You have been walking around these halls, acting like a king, firing people, cutting costs, and stealing from the poor. You told everyone you were the owner." I reached up and pulled the messy tie from my hair. My hair fell down around my shoulders, framing my face. I stood up to my full height. Despite the coffee stains, despite the mud, I felt more powerful than I ever had in a boardroom suit. "But you are not the owner. Liam," I said clearly, "you never were. My father left this building, this company, and every single asset in the Larkspur portfolio to one person, me." I gestured to the grand lobby around us. "I am Eva Larkspur," I announced. "I am the sole shareholder. I am the chairwoman, and I am the only person in this building who signs the checks." Liam slumped against the desk. He knew this, of course, but he had spent so long pretending it wasn't true. Pretending that my power was actually his, that hearing it said out loud shattered his delusion. I let you sit in the CEO chair because I trusted you. I continued, my voice echoing. I let you run operations because I thought we shared a vision. But clearly, the only vision you have is for your own gratification. I walked over to him. I stopped 2 feet away. I wanted to smell the fear on him. You asked for a decision, I said. You wanted to know why I came back early. I came back to save my company from you. I looked him up and down, letting my gaze linger on his loosened tie and his sweating face. Liam Sterling, I said, and the words felt like cutting a heavy anchor chain. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties as Chief Executive Officer of Larkspur Holdings. Your access passes are revoked. Your company accounts are frozen, and your employment is terminated. You can't, Liam whispered, but there was no fight left in him. Ava, please, the scandal, the stock price. Think about the company. I am thinking about the company, I replied. That is why I am cutting out the cancer. I turned to the head of security, a man named Marcus who had worked for my father for 20 years. Marcus, I said. Yes, Ms. Larkspur, Marcus replied instantly, straightening his uniform. Please escort Mr. Sterling to the exit, I ordered. He is not to go to his office. He is not to touch a computer. If he tries to re-enter the building, you are to treat him as a trespasser. Understood, ma'am, Marcus said. He signaled to the other guards. They moved in on Liam, forming a wall of black uniforms around him. Eva, Liam cried out as Marcus took his arm. Ava, you can't do this. I am your husband. I built this place. You didn't build it, I said, turning my back on him. You just rented the view, and the lease is up. I looked at Julian. He gave me a single, sharp nod. But the drama wasn't over. Liam, realizing that his career was dead, that his marriage was over, and that his reputation was in ashes, decided to play his final, desperate card, a card he had been hiding up his sleeve for 3 months. He shook off Marcus's hand. He stood up straight, a manic grin spreading across his face. You fire me, Liam laughed. It was a broken, jagged sound. You think you can just fire me? You think it is that simple? He reached into his inner jacket pocket. Julian tensed, ready to tackle him if he pulled a weapon. But Liam didn't pull a gun. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. You can't fire me. Eva, Liam sneered, waving the paper in the air. Because you don't have the votes anymore. He looked at me with a triumph that made my skin crawl. While you were playing saint in the mountains, Liam hissed. I was busy. I sold 51% of your voting shares this morning. The deal closed an hour ago. I am not just the CEO, Ava. I am the new owner's representative. He laughed again, looking at Bella, looking at the crowd. So go ahead, Liam taunted. Call security, but get ready to leave, because this building doesn't belong to you anymore. I looked at the paper in his hand. Then I looked at Julian. Julian didn't flinch. In fact, a small, barely perceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. Liam thought he had played an ace. He didn't realize we were playing a different game entirely. The piece of paper in Liam's hand was trembling, not from a breeze, but from the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He looked like a man who had just pulled the pin on a grenade and was delighted to find he was holding the only shield. You think this is over, Liam sneered, his voice rising to a manic pitch that echoed uncomfortably off the gold leaf ceiling. You think you can just walk in here, dressed like a beggar, and take my life away. You are naive. Ava, you always were. You thought business was about ethics. I know it is about leverage. He thrust the paper toward me. Read it, he screamed. Read the transfer order. It was executed at 9 o'clock this morning. While you were stuck in traffic, I was finalizing the deal of the century. I did not move to take the paper. I did not need to. I knew exactly what it said. I knew the font size, the margins, and the specific clause in paragraph 4. I knew it because I had written the original template years ago. You sold the voting shares, I said calmly. 51%, Liam declared. a wild, triumphant grin stretching across his face. I sold 51% of the Class A voting stock. I signed the transfer using the power of attorney you left me. You are a minority shareholder now. Eva, you are nothing. The new owners, the Vanguard Group out of Zurich, they love me. They promised to keep me on as CEO. They think I am a visionary. He turned to the security guards, who had paused, uncertain of who actually signed their paychecks in light of this new information. So, Liam continued, buttoning his jacket with trembling fingers, trying to regain his composure. Technically, I am still the boss. And technically, Eva, you are trespassing on private property owned by my partners. Marcus, escort this woman out, and take her pet lawyer with her. The silence that followed was suffocating. The crowd looked from Liam to me, confused. The balance of power had shifted so violently in the last 10 seconds that the air felt thin. Then, a movement caught my eye. Bella Sinclair. The girl who had been sobbing on the floor moments ago. The girl who had been physically shoved and verbally abused by Liam was standing up. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. She looked at Liam, then at the paper, and I saw the calculation happen behind her eyes. It was crude, instinctive, and pitiful. If Liam was ruined, she was a victim. But if Liam was the winner, if Liam was still the CEO and had just outsmarted the heiress, then she was the queen again. Bella smoothed down her skirt. She took a step toward Liam, a hesitant, wavering smile appearing on her lips. "You really sold it?" she asked, her voice trembling with hope. "You are still the CEO." "I am the king," Liam said, looking at her with a renewed arrogance. He didn't apologize for pushing her. He didn't apologize for the insults. He just offered her power, assuming that was enough to buy her silence. "And you, Bella, are going to be my creative director. Just like I promised, once we get rid of this trash." He gestured dismissively at me. Bella's face hardened. She turned to me, her chin lifting. The fear was gone, replaced by the same sneering entitlement she had shown when she spilled the coffee. "You heard him," Bella said, her voice gaining strength. "Get out. You lost. Go back to your little cabin in the woods and cry about it. We have a company to run." I watched them, the two of them, standing together against the backdrop of the empire my father built. They were perfect for each other, a narcissist and a parasite, bonded by greed and a total lack of moral compass. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was the laugh of a grandmaster who watches an opponent proudly capture a pawn, not realizing they have just opened their king to a fatal strike. "Julian," I said softly. "Yes, Eva," Julian replied. He was standing to my right, his face a mask of stone. "Mr. Sterling seems to believe he has sold my company to a Swiss conglomerate called the Vanguard Group," I said. "He seems to believe that this sale is valid. He does appear to be under that impression." Julian agreed. I looked at Liam. "You used the power of attorney." "Damn right I did," Liam scoffed. "You signed it before you left. Full authority to act in the best interest of the company. I decided that getting rid of your stifling control was in the best interest of the company. There is just one problem." "Liam," I said, taking a slow step forward. "The power of attorney you are referring to, the one I signed 3 months ago." "What about it?" Liam snapped, though a flicker of doubt appeared in his eyes. "It expired 30 days after I left," I said. "It was a limited duration instrument. It became void on November 21st. Liam froze. The color drained from his face. No, that is a lie. I checked it. I had legal look at it." "You had your legal team look at it," Julian corrected him. "You didn't have me look at it. And if you had bothered to read the addendum on page 42, you would have seen the expiration clause." Liam's hands began to shake again. The paper rattled. So what? I signed it. I signed your name. I have been signing your name on documents for years. It is implied consent. The deal is done. The money is in the offshore account." "Ah, yes," I said. "The signature." I looked at Julian. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a small, sleek device. It was a digital voice recorder. He also pulled out a folded document from his own pocket. "You see, Liam," I said, my voice dropping to a conversational volume that was somehow more terrifying than a scream. "I didn't go to Appalachia just to build houses. I did build houses. The work was real. But I left Chicago for 3 months because I needed to give you enough rope." "Rope," Liam whispered. "I knew you were stealing," I said. "I knew about the petty cash. I knew about the kickbacks from the construction vendors. But it was small. Petty theft. If I divorced you for that, you would have fought me for half my assets. You would have dragged the Larkspur name through the mud for years. I needed something definitive. I needed you to commit a crime so egregious, so undeniable, that you would never see the inside of a boardroom again." I nodded to Julian. "The Vanguard Group," Julian said, reading from the document in his hand. "Incorporated in Zurich on December 1st. Sole beneficiary, an anonymous trust." Liam's eyes darted back and forth. "So that proves nothing." "Actually," Julian continued, "it proves everything, because the sole beneficiary of the trust that owns Vanguard is Eva Larkspur." The silence in the lobby was absolute. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Liam blinked. "What?" "I bought the shares." "Liam," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "I set up the shell company. I instructed the brokers to approach you. I offered you a price that was 20% above market value because I knew your greed would override your caution. I knew you couldn't resist selling me out if the price was right." Liam stared at me. His mouth hung open. The realization was crashing over him like a tidal wave. "You bought your own company," he stammered. "I did," I confirmed. "Which means I still own 100% of Larkspur Holdings. The transfer of ownership is circular. Nothing has changed, except for one thing." I pointed to the paper in his hand. "You signed my name on a stock transfer document worth $600 million, I said. "You did it without a valid power of attorney. You did it with the intent to defraud the primary shareholder. And you did it to hide the $4 million you stole for your mistress." I took a step closer, watching the light die in his eyes. "That is not just a breach of fiduciary duty. Liam, that is securities fraud. That is wire fraud. That is aggravated identity theft. And since the wire transfer went through a bank in Switzerland, it is a federal crime under international jurisdiction." Liam dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing on top of the photos of him and Bella. "You trapped me," he whispered. Horror was dawning on him. The board meeting, the frantic rush downstairs, the sale, it had all been a play, and he was the only one who didn't know his lines. "I tested you," I corrected him. "I gave you 3 months of freedom. I gave you the keys to the kingdom. I genuinely prayed. Liam, that you would prove me wrong. I wanted you to run this company with integrity. I wanted you to stay faithful, but you didn't. You sold me out the moment you thought no one was watching." Bella let out a choked sound. She stepped away from Liam as if he were radioactive. She realized, with the terrifying clarity of self-preservation, that there was no queen, no creative director, and no penthouse. There was only a felon standing next to her. "I didn't know," Bella shouted, turning to the camera, turning to me, turning to anyone who would listen. "I didn't know he was doing anything illegal. I am a victim here. He lied to me, too." "Quiet," Julian said. He didn't shout, but his voice carried the weight of a gavel. He turned to the entrance. He raised a hand. From the shadows of the revolving door, where they had been waiting patiently for the signal, 4 men in blue windbreakers walked in. On the back of their jackets, in bold yellow letters, was the acronym FBI. Liam saw them. His knees gave way. This time, he didn't kneel to beg. He collapsed. He hit the floor hard, his legs simply refusing to hold the weight of his reality. He sat there, staring at the marble, shaking his head mutely. "It was a setup," he mumbled, over and over. "It was a setup. It was a sting," I said, looking down at him. "And you took the bait hook?" line, and sinker. I looked at the FBI agents as they approached. They were professional, swift. One of them, a tall woman with stern eyes, nodded to me. "Ms. Larkspur," she said, "we have the warrant." "He is all yours," I replied. I watched as they hauled Liam to his feet. He was limp, dead weight. The man who had strutted out of the elevator 10 minutes ago, the king of the tower, was now being cuffed, his hands pulled roughly behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. "Ava!" Liam screamed as they began to drag him away. "Ava, you can't do this. I am your husband. I love you, Ava." I didn't answer him. I didn't look away, either. I watched him. I bore witness to his downfall just as he had orchestrated mine. Bella tried to slink away. She moved toward the edge of the crowd, trying to blend in, trying to hide the phone that had documented her own complicity. "Ms. Sinclair?" Julian's voice rang out. Bella froze. "I believe the agents will want a word with you as well," Julian said pleasantly. "Possession of stolen property, the car, the jewelry, the apartment, it is all evidence in a federal investigation. I suggest you do not leave the building." Bella let out a wail that sounded like a siren. She collapsed onto a bench, burying her face in her hands, her 15 minutes of fame turning into a lifetime of infamy. I stood in the center of the lobby. My hoodie was sticky, my feet were cold, I was exhausted, but as I looked around at the empire that was finally truly mine again, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the heating system. It was the warmth of a house cleaned of rot. "Julian," I said quietly, as the commotion of the arrest began to fade. "Yes, boss," he said. "Call the cleaning crew," I said, looking at the puddle of coffee and the scattered papers on the floor. "And then call the board. Tell them I am back, and tell them the meeting is in 1 hour." "With pleasure," Julian said, and for the first time in 10 years, his smile reached his eyes. The arrival of federal agents in a corporate lobby is a specific kind of theater. It lacks the chaotic urgency of a street arrest. There are no sirens wailing, no guns drawn, no shouting of commands. Instead, it is quiet, bureaucratic, and terrifyingly final. It is the machinery of the state grinding a person into dust. The 4 agents moved with a synchronized efficiency that made Liam Sterling look like a clumsy amateur. They did not run toward him. They walked. Their shoes clicked on the marble floor with a heavy, rhythmic cadence that sounded like the ticking of a doomsday clock. Liam was still on the floor, his expensive suit trousers bunched around his knees, his face a mask of ashen disbelief. He looked up at the woman standing over him, Special Agent Miller. According to the badge clipped to her belt, and his mouth opened and closed silently. "Liam Sterling," Agent Miller said. Her voice was not loud, yet it carried to the back of the room. It was a voice devoid of emotion, a voice that turned a human being into a case number. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, embezzlement of charitable funds, and aggravated identity theft." Liam flinched with each charge as if he were being physically struck. "Stand up," she ordered. It was not a request. 2 male agents stepped forward. They grabbed Liam by the upper arms, their grip firm and unyielding. They hoisted him to his feet with no more care than one would handle a sack of flour. Liam stumbled, his legs jelly, his equilibrium shattered. He looked small. Without the podium, without the title, without the arrogance that he wore like armor, he was just a cheating husband in a rumpled suit. "Turn around," one of the agents commanded. Liam complied slowly. He turned his back to me. He turned his back to the cameras. He turned his back on the life he had stolen. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is distinct. Click, click, click. It is a sharp, metallic biting sound. It signaled the end of Liam Sterling, the CEO. It was the birth of inmate Sterling. "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Miller recited, her eyes scanning the room, daring anyone to interfere. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Liam let out a sob. It was a pathetic, wet sound. He tried to twist his head back to look at me, his eyes wide and red-rimmed. "Ava," he choked out. "Ava, tell them to stop. This is a mistake. I can fix it. I can pay it back. I have money in the Caymans. I can transfer it back tonight. Just tell them to let me go." I watched him. I watched the man I had once thought was the love of my life bargaining with his freedom like a desperate gambler at a roulette table. "You do not have money in the Caymans." "Liam," I said, my voice cutting through his panic. "The FBI has already frozen those accounts. Julian sent them the routing numbers 20 minutes ago." Liam's face crumbled. The last spark of hope, the hope that money could solve this, was extinguished. He slumped in the agent's grip, his head dropping to his chest. While the eyes of the room were fixed on the disintegration of the king, a movement in the periphery caught my attention. Bella Sinclair. The queen was trying to abdicate. She was attempting to perform a vanishing act. While everyone watched Liam, Bella had quietly picked up her purse and was sidestepping toward the revolving doors. She moved with a hunched posture, trying to make herself small, trying to blend into the crowd of employees she had been sneering at only moments before. She looked like a rat abandoning a sinking ship, desperate to find a hole to scurry into. She was 10 feet from the door. She reached out a hand, her fingers inches from the glass that promised freedom and a taxi to obscurity. "Stop her," I said. I did not shout. I did not have to. 2 uniformed security guards, men who had been forced to listen to Bella's insults about their cheap uniforms for weeks, stepped in front of the door. They crossed their arms. They were large men, broad-shouldered and imposing. They blocked the exit completely. Bella gasped. Skidding to a halt, she turned around, looking for another exit. But there was none. She was trapped in the gold-plated cage she had been so eager to rule. "Going somewhere, Ms. Sinclair?" Julian Vance asked. Julian stepped out from behind me. He held a second document in his hand. He walked toward Bella with a predatory grace. He did not look angry. He looked like a surgeon preparing to excise a tumor. "I have to go," Bella stammered, clutching her purse to her chest. Her face was streaked with black tears, her blonde hair matted with sweat. "I have an appointment. My mom is sick. I have to go." "I am afraid that is not possible," Julian said smoothly. He stopped 3 feet from her, maintaining a professional distance that somehow made the situation more menacing. "Why?" Bella shrieked, her voice rising to a hysteric pitch. "I didn't do anything. I am just an intern. He is the one who stole the money. He is the bad guy. I was just his girlfriend." "Correction," Julian said, consulting the paper in his hand. "You are not just a girlfriend. You are a named co-conspirator in a federal indictment." Bella's jaw dropped. "What?" "Receiving stolen property," Julian listed, ticking the items off on his fingers. "The apartment in Millennium Tower purchased with embezzled funds. The Porsche Cayenne leased under a fraudulent corporate account. The diamond ring on your finger paid for with a check from the Larkspur Hope Foundation." He looked at her, his eyes hard behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "And let us not forget the clothing," he added, gesturing to her ruined outfit. "That cashmere sweater, the skirt, the shoes, the handbag. According to the credit card statements, every single item currently touching your body was purchased with stolen money. You are literally wearing the evidence, Ms. Sinclair." "I didn't know," Bella screamed. She looked around the lobby, her eyes wide with terror, seeking an ally, seeking sympathy. "I swear I didn't know. He told me he was rich. He told me it was his money. I am a victim here. I am just a girl." She saw the FBI agents leading Liam toward the door. Panic overtook her. She realized that she was not going to be left behind to spin the narrative. She was going with him. She threw herself toward me. She didn't attack this time. She fell. She scrambled across the marble floor on her hands and knees, ignoring the pain, ignoring the dignity she had prized so highly. She crawled toward me, her hands reaching out to grab the hem of my muddy jeans. "Ava Ms. Larkspur," she wailed. "Please, please help me. You are a woman, you understand. He tricked me. I am only 22. I didn't mean to be mean to you. I was just jealous. I was stupid. She grabbed my leg, her fingers digging into the denim. Don't let them take me to jail, she begged, snot and tears running down her face. I can't go to jail. I am an influencer. I have a life. Please, just fire me. I will leave town. I will do anything. I will scrub the floors. Just don't let them arrest me. I looked down at her. I remembered the way she had looked at me 20 minutes ago. I remembered the sneer. I remembered her calling me trash. I remembered her laughing as she poured coffee onto my chest. I remembered her live streaming my humiliation to 50,000 strangers for clout. She wasn't crying because she was sorry. She was crying because she was caught. I reached down and gently but firmly peeled her fingers off my leg. I did not push her. I simply removed her touch from my person. Get up, I said. Bella looked up at me, hope flaring in her eyes. She thought I was softening. She thought the sisterhood card had worked. She scrambled to her knees, looking at me with wide, wet eyes. You will help me, she whispered. You will tell them it was a mistake. I took a half step closer to her. I leaned down so our faces were level. I wanted her to see the lines around my eyes. I wanted her to see the exhaustion and the resolve. You said you were 22, I said softly. Yes, Bella nodded frantically. I am so young I didn't know better. At 22, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that only she and the nearest guards could hear. I was running this company while nursing my dying father. At 22, I was building homes for people who had lost everything in a flood. At 22, I knew the difference between right and wrong. Bella's face fell. The hope vanished, replaced by a cold dread. You are not a child, Bella. I continued. You are an adult who made a series of choices. You chose to mock a stranger because of her clothes. You chose to date a married man for his money. You chose to accept gifts that you knew deep down were too good to be true. And when you thought you had power, you chose to be cruel. I straightened up, towering over her kneeling form. Youth is not an excuse for cruelty, I said, my voice ringing out clearly now, and ignorance is not an excuse for greed. I looked at the FBI agents who were waiting patiently for me to finish. Take her, I said. Bella screamed. It was a high, thin sound of despair. No, you can't. He seduced me. It is not fair. Life is not fair, I said, turning my back on her. But the legal system tries to be. You can explain your innocence to a federal judge. Learn to be a human being in prison. Bella, you will have plenty of time for introspection. My phone, Bella shrieked, as the agents pulled her to her feet and handcuffed her. I need my phone. I need to call my followers. They will save me. She lunged for the bench where her phone was propped up, still broadcasting. The battery was dying, but the red light was still blinking. The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur, people watching the downfall of their idol in real time. Secure that device, Agent Miller barked. A uniformed officer stepped forward and grabbed the phone. Bella watched in horror as her connection to the world, her source of validation, her lifeline, was snatched away. The officer looked at the screen. He looked at the 50,000 viewers, and then, with a blank expression, he pressed the end stream button. The screen went black. No, Bella sobbed, her body going limp. You killed me. You killed my brand. Move, the agent ordered, pushing her toward the door. They marched them out. Liam Sterling, the fallen king, weeping silently with his head down. Bella Sinclair, the aspiring queen, screaming and kicking like a toddler. As they reached the revolving doors, the same doors Bella had walked through like a celebrity. Less than an hour ago, a sound began to rise from the lobby. It started slowly. Clap, then another. Clap, clap. I looked around. It was the old delivery man, the one Bella had sneered at. He was standing by the reception desk, his cap in his hand, clapping his hands together with a grim satisfaction. Then the receptionist joined in. She stood up, spitting out her gum, and clapped hard, her eyes fixed on Liam's retreating back with pure loathing. Then the maintenance crew, then the security guards, then the junior analysts who had come down from the offices above to see what the commotion was. The applause swelled. It grew louder and louder until it filled the cavernous lobby like thunder. It wasn't the polite applause of a golf tournament. It was the raw, raucous applause of liberation. It was the sound of people who had been bullied, threatened, and marginalized for months. Finally seeing the bully get a bloody nose, they were clapping for the arrest, but they were also clapping for me. I stood in the center of the storm. I did not bow. I did not wave. I just stood there. My gray hoodie was stained dark with coffee. My jeans were ripped. My sneakers were caked in dried Appalachian mud. My hair was a disaster, but as I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of my employees, I knew I had never looked more like the chairwoman of Larkspur Holdings than I did right now. I felt Julian step up beside me. He didn't clap. He just stood there, a silent sentinel, his presence a comforting weight at my shoulder. "Well," Julian said, his voice dry and devoid of humor, "that concludes the morning entertainment." I took a deep breath. The air in the lobby tasted different now. The cloying scent of Bella's vanilla perfume was fading. The smell of Liam's fear was gone. It smelled like marble polish, cold air, and a clean slate. "It is not over yet," I said, watching the police cruiser lights flash through the glass doors. "This was the easy part. Now we have to clean up the mess they left behind." "We will," Julian said. "But first, Eva, perhaps a change of clothes." I looked down at my stained hoodie. I touched the sticky fabric. "No," I said, lifting my chin. "Not yet. I want the board to see me like this." "Like what?" Julian asked. "Like a survivor," I replied. "I want them to see exactly what it takes to save this company. I want them to smell the coffee and the mud. I want them to know that while they were sitting in their ivory towers, I was down here in the trenches, fighting for the soul of this place." The applause was dying down, replaced by a respectful silence. The employees were looking to me, waiting for orders, waiting for leadership. I straightened my spine. The fatigue that had been pulling at my bones vanished, replaced by the familiar rush of responsibility. "Back to work, everyone," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and absolute. "The show is over. We have a company to rebuild, and as one, the people of Larkspur Tower turned and went back to their posts. The king was dead. Long live the queen." The water that swirled down the drain of the executive shower suite was dark brown. It was a mixture of Appalachian mud, dried coffee, sticky caramel syrup, and the accumulated grime of a 3-month exile. I watched it disappear, feeling as though I was washing away not just the dirt of the day, but the residue of the last 10 years. When I stepped out of the shower, I did not reach for a towel. I reached for armor. My assistant, who had been weeping with relief when I walked into the office, had retrieved my emergency suit from the climate-controlled vault in my closet. It was a black Yves Saint Laurent power suit, tailored sharply at the waist, with a silk lapel that caught the light like a blade. I pulled my hair back into a severe, polished chignon. I applied a layer of crimson lipstick. When I looked in the mirror, the woman in the muddy hoodie was gone. Eva Larkspur, the chairwoman, had returned. The press conference was scheduled for 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The media room was packed to capacity. Every major news outlet in Chicago was there, their cameras set up in a dense forest of tripods. The story of the coffee spill CEO had already gone viral, trending #1 globally. They were hungry for blood. They wanted to see the scorned wife. I walked onto the podium, not with a hung head, but with a stride that commanded silence. I stood alone at the microphone, my hands resting on the lectern. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady. "Today, a cancer was removed from Larkspur Holdings. I did not make excuses. I did not blame market forces or misunderstandings. I looked directly into the camera lenses and took full responsibility. I apologized to the shareholders for my lack of oversight, I apologized to the public for the misuse of charitable funds, and most importantly, I apologized to my employees. A company is only as good as the people who work within it, I said. And for too long, I allowed a culture of arrogance and disrespect to fester in these halls. That ends today. I turned to my right, where Julian Vance was standing in the wings, looking uncomfortable in the spotlight. Effective immediately, I announced. Julian Vance will assume the role of interim chief executive officer. Julian has been the moral compass of this firm for a decade. He is the only man I trust to steer us through this storm with integrity. The flashbulbs erupted. Julian stepped forward, giving a curt, serious nod. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He looked like a man accepting a heavy burden because he knew he was the only one strong enough to carry it. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal motions and corporate surgery. The divorce was surprisingly swift. Usually, dissolving a marriage involving billions of assets takes years, but Liam had no leverage. The evidence Julian had compiled was so overwhelming that Liam's lawyers advised him to sign whatever I put in front of him to avoid further wrath from the federal prosecutors. I sat across from him in the deposition room only once. He looked older, the prison haircut did not suit him, and the orange jumpsuit washed out his complexion. He tried to catch my eye, tried to summon some of that old charm, but I looked through him as if he were a pane of glass. He signed the papers. He left the marriage with exactly what he brought into it, nothing. The criminal trial was equally efficient. The federal prosecutors did not offer a plea deal. They wanted to make an example of him. Liam Sterling, the man who thought he could steal from veterans to buy diamonds for his mistress, was sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. As the judge read the sentence, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't realized I was carrying. It wasn't joy, it was relief. Bella Sinclair's fate was less dramatic, but perhaps more poetic. She served 6 months in a minimum security facility for possession of stolen property and accessory to fraud. But the real punishment awaited her on the outside. When she was released, she attempted to return to social media. She posted a tearful apology video, fully styled, hoping to garner sympathy and launch a comeback as a reformed victim. The internet, however, has a long memory. The comments section was a bloodbath. She was mocked, parodied, and rejected. No brand would touch her. No agency would sign her. The Queen of Larkspur Tower was toxic. 6 months later, I heard from a friend that Bella was working at a small nail salon in a strip mall in the suburbs of Naperville. I drove by once, just to see. Through the window, I saw her filing the toenails of an elderly woman. She looked tired. Her platinum hair had grown out, showing dark roots. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. She was wearing a generic smock. She looked up as my car passed, and for a second, our eyes met. There was no defiance left, just the dull resignation of a girl who had reached for the sun and burned her hands. I didn't stop. I kept driving. My focus was on the tower. The purge I had promised began the morning after the arrest. I went through the employee roster with a fine-toothed comb. Anyone who had been hired by Liam based on nepotism or flattery was shown the door. The sycophants who had cheered his cruelty, the managers who had cut corners on safety to boost their bonuses, they were all terminated. But the reconstruction was more important than the demolition. I walked down to the lobby on my first Monday back as active chairwoman. The reception desk was no longer manned by the gum-chewing girl who had sneered at the delivery man. She had been fired within the hour of my return. Instead, sitting behind the marble desk was Mrs. Gable. She was a woman in her 60s who had worked in the archives for 20 years. Liam had tried to force her into early retirement because he thought she looked too old for the front of the house. I brought her back. She greeted every guest with a warm smile and a professionalism that no amount of youth could replicate. And Marcus, the security guard who had followed my orders to arrest Liam, was promoted to head of building security. He walked taller now, wearing a new suit. Knowing that his integrity had been recognized, I even tracked down the elderly delivery man. Mr. Henderson, I found out he was struggling to pay for his wife's medical bills. I couldn't hire him directly, but I set up a scholarship fund in his name for his grandchildren and ensured that his delivery company was given a preferred vendor contract with a 20% rate increase. Finally, there was the penthouse. The sprawling, two-story apartment at the top of the tower had been my home with Liam. It was filled with memories, most of them now tainted by lies. I couldn't sleep there. The silence was too loud. I listed it for sale 3 weeks after the arrest. It sold immediately to a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley for $25 million. I took the check to Julian's office. "Deposit this," I said, sliding the slip of paper across his desk. Julian looked at the number. "Into your personal trust." "No," I said. "Open a new account. I want to start a foundation, the Larkspur Initiative. It will provide venture capital and legal support for female entrepreneurs who are starting businesses in underprivileged communities." Julian looked up at me. A slow smile spread across his face. "Turning the wreckage into a foundation. Very efficient." "It is not efficiency," I said, looking out the window at the Chicago skyline. "It is exorcism. I am done funding his lifestyle. I want to fund the future." In the quiet months that followed, as the scandal faded from the headlines and the company stock began to climb back toward record highs, I found myself spending more time in Julian's office. We would work late, ordering Thai food and reviewing contracts, just as we had done in the early days. But something had shifted. The professional distance that had always defined our relationship had softened. One rainy Tuesday evening, 6 months after the arrest, I was sitting on the leather sofa in his office, reading a brief. Julian was at his desk, the soft light of the lamp illuminating his face. He was focused, his brow furrowed slightly as he read. I watched him. I really looked at him. I thought about the last 10 years. I thought about how, whenever Liam had forgotten my birthday, a gift from the couple would appear on my desk, chosen with impeccable taste books I loved, rare teas I enjoyed. I had always assumed Liam had a good assistant. Now, looking at Julian, I realized who had bought them. I thought about the times I had been exhausted, ready to give up, and Julian had been there with a solution, a plan, a quiet word of encouragement. He had never asked for credit. He had never tried to outshine Liam. He had simply stood in the shadow, holding the roof up while Liam danced on the shingles. "Julian," I said softly. He looked up immediately, marking his page with a finger. "Yes, Eva. Do you need more tea?" "No," I said. "I was just wondering, why did you stay?" "Stay?" he repeated, confused. "You could have left," I said. "You are one of the best legal minds in the country. You could have been a partner at any firm in New York or London. Why did you stay here? Watching Liam run this place into the ground, why did you put up with him?" Julian was silent for a long moment. He took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly with a microfiber cloth. "I didn't stay for Liam," he said quietly. He put his glasses back on and looked me in the eye. "I stayed for the company. Your father asked me to look after it." He paused, and his gaze held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "And," he added, his voice dropping an octave, "he asked me to look after you." The realization hit me like a physical wave. It wasn't a sudden spark of romance. It was the heavy, grounding weight of a truth that had been there all along, while I had been chasing the flashy, loud, exciting love that Liam offered. Julian had been offering me the one thing I actually needed: loyalty. He had protected me. He had gathered the evidence not to destroy the company, but to save me from a fraud. He had taken the hit, done the dirty work, and stood by my side in the lobby when my world was falling apart. "You knew," I whispered. "About everything. For how long?" "Long enough," Julian said. "But you needed to see it for yourself. If I had told you a year ago, you would have hated me. You loved him." "I loved a ghost," I said, bitter, standing up and walking over to his desk. "I loved a performance." "And now?" Julian asked, looking up at me. "Now," I said, resting my hand on the edge of his desk, "I think I am finally starting to see the real thing." Julian didn't move. He didn't reach out. He just looked at me with a patience that had weathered a decade of storms. "I am not going anywhere, Ava," he said. "I know," I replied, and for the first time in a year, I smiled a genuine, warm smile. And neither am I. The wounds Liam had inflicted were deep, and they would take time to heal. But as I stood there in the quiet office, with the rain drumming against the glass and the man who had saved my life sitting across from me, I knew that the healing had finally begun. I was no longer the victim in the muddy hoodie. I was Eva Larkspur, and I was exactly where I belonged. They say that time is a river, constantly flowing and smoothing over the jagged edges of our past. If that is true, then the last 12 months have been a waterfall, a powerful, cleansing force that washed away the debris of my old life and carved out something entirely new. Exactly 1 year had passed since the day I walked into the lobby of Larkspur Tower, wearing a mud-stained hoodie and carrying the weight of a dying marriage. Tonight, the lobby was transformed. The cold, corporate marble was softened by thousands of white orchids and cascading silk ribbons. The harsh fluorescent lighting had been replaced by the warm, golden glow of candlelight and crystal chandeliers. It was the 50th anniversary gala of Larkspur Holdings. But to me, it felt like a first birthday. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at the sea of guests. I was not wearing old leggings today. I was wearing a floor-length gown of midnight blue velvet, off the shoulder, with a slit that allowed for movement. It was elegant, powerful, and unapologetically feminine. Around my neck, there were no diamonds bought with stolen charity funds. There was a simple, vintage sapphire pendant that had belonged to my mother. "You look like you're about to conquer a small country," a voice said beside me. I turned to see Julian Vance. If I had changed, Julian had evolved. He was no longer the shadow in the background. He was standing in the light, and it suited him. He wore a tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. A stark contrast to the slightly rumpled work suits he used to live in, as the interim CEO and soon to be permanent. If the board approved my recommendation next week, he carried an air of authority that was different from Liam's. Liam's authority had been loud, demanding attention. Julian's authority was quiet. It was the gravitational pull of a planet. You didn't have to see it to know it was the most powerful thing in the room. "I am not interested in conquering countries," I replied, smiling at him. "I am just trying to survive the cocktail hour without tripping on this hem." "I will catch you," Julian said. It was a simple statement, delivered with the same factual certainty he used when discussing contract law. I always do. We walked down the stairs together. The hush that fell over the room wasn't the terrified silence of the past. It was respectful. The guests raised their glasses. These were our partners, our investors, and most importantly, our employees. The vibe of the company had shifted completely. The fear was gone. In its place was a sense of purpose. We had spent the last year rebuilding not just the balance sheet, but the soul of Larkspur Holdings. We had launched the Veteran Housing Project, which was now fully occupied. We had expanded the scholarship fund. We had proven that you could be profitable without being predatory. As we moved through the crowd, I felt light. The heavy anchor of suspicion that used to sit in my gut whenever I was with Liam was gone. With Julian, everything was transparent. We argued. Certainly. We debated strategy until 2 a.m, but there were no secrets. There were no hidden accounts. There were just two people rowing the same boat in the same direction. The orchestra began to play a slower tempo. The chatter in the room softened. "Eva," Julian said, offering me his hand, "I believe this is the part of the evening where the executives are expected to lead by example. May I have this dance?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second. I hadn't danced in years. Liam had hated dancing. He said it made him look foolish. But looking at Julian's open palm, I realized I wasn't afraid of looking foolish anymore. "You may," I said. He led me to the center of the floor. His hand settled on the small of my back, firm, warm, and respectful. We moved together with an ease that surprised me. It felt natural, as if we had been practicing this rhythm for years in the quiet spaces between board meetings and crisis calls. "You are thinking about something," Julian murmured, spinning me gently so I avoided a collision with a waiter. "I can see that little crease between your eyebrows. It usually appears when you are reading a force majeure clause." I laughed softly. "I was just thinking about how different this room looks. The last time I was the center of attention here, I was dripping with coffee and being screamed at by an influencer." "A distinct improvement," Julian agreed dryly. "Although, I must say, the coffee look was very avant-garde." "Don't tease me," I warned, though I was smiling. "I am serious," Julian said, and his expression turned solemn. "You were terrifying that day, and magnificent. I don't think I have ever admired anyone more than I admired you in that moment." The intensity in his eyes made my breath hitch. The music swelled, a violin crescendo that seemed to wrap around us, isolating us from the hundreds of people watching. "I need some air," Julian said suddenly. "It is too crowded in here. Come with me." He didn't wait for an answer. He took my hand and led me off the dance floor, weaving through the tables, past the reception desk where Mrs. Gable gave us a knowing wink, and toward the private elevator that led to the observation deck. The night air on the 52nd floor was crisp, carrying the scent of the lake. The city of Chicago lay spread out below us like a carpet of diamonds. The traffic on the streets looked like ribbons of light, pulsing with the heartbeat of the metropolis. We walked to the edge of the balcony. Leaning against the railing, the wind whipped at stray strands of my hair. But I didn't care. "I have something for you," Julian said. I turned to him. "Julian, we agreed. No gifts. The company numbers were the gift." "This isn't a company gift," he said. He reached into his jacket pocket. My heart gave a strange, frantic thump. For a moment, I panicked. Was this it? Was he going to pull out a ring box? Was he going to ruin this perfect, fragile partnership with a proposal I wasn't ready for? I had just escaped a marriage that felt like a prison. I wasn't ready to sign another contract, no matter how much I trusted the man. But Julian did not pull out a velvet box. He pulled out a rolled-up tube of paper, tied with a simple blue ribbon. He handed it to me. "Open it." I took the roll, my fingers trembling slightly. I untied the ribbon and unrolled the thick, high-quality paper. I had to hold it down against the wind. It was a blueprint. I squinted in the dim light of the city glow. It was an architectural drawing of a mid-rise building. The lines were sweeping and modern, utilizing glass and sustainable timber. It featured a central atrium filled with light, community gardens on the roof, and studios designed for mixed-use art spaces. It was beautiful, but it was also familiar. I gasped. "This is my design." "It is," Julian confirmed. "I found your old sketchbooks in the archives, the ones you packed away 10 years ago when you married Liam, the ones you told me were just childish doodles." I traced the lines of the drawing with my finger. I remembered drawing this. I was 20 years old, sitting in a studio apartment, dreaming of becoming an architect before my father got sick, before the duty of the family empire fell on my shoulders, before Liam convinced me that a CEO didn't have time for hobbies. "You digitized it," I whispered. "You finished the structural engineering." "I had the engineering team run the load-bearing calculations last month," Julian said. "It is viable. Eva, it can be built." He pointed to the bottom corner of the blueprint, to the title block. Project name, the Eva Larkspur Center for the Arts. Location, the River North Lot. Lead architect Eva Larkspur. Tears pricked my eyes. Hot and sudden. "The River North Lot?" I asked, looking up at him. "But we are planning to build a commercial high-rise there. It is the most valuable piece of land in our portfolio." "We were planning that," Julian corrected. "But I realized we don't need another office building. Chicago has enough offices. What it needs is soul, and you need to create. You are not just a manager. Eva, you are an artist who forgot how to hold a brush." He stepped closer, placing his hands over mine on the railing. "I don't want to marry you for your shares," Julian said, his voice low and rough with emotion. "I don't want to use you for clout. I don't want a penthouse or a plane. I just want you to be the person you were meant to be before the world told you to make yourself smaller." He took a deep breath, looking out at the city, and then turned his gaze fully to me. "I have loved you for 12 years, Ava," he said. "I loved you when you were the nervous heir taking over your father's desk. I loved you when you were the dutiful wife trying to fix a broken man. And I love you now, standing here, finally free. I didn't say anything because I wanted you to be happy, even if it wasn't with me, but I can't stay silent anymore." I looked at the blueprint in my hands. Then I looked at the man standing before me. Liam had bought me diamonds because they sparkled. He bought me cars because they were status symbols. He bought things that reflected him. Julian had given me a piece of paper, but on that paper, he had given me back myself. He had given me back the dream I had sacrificed. He had looked past the title, past the money, past the trauma, and seen the creative, passionate woman buried underneath. This was what love was supposed to be. It wasn't fireworks and drama. It wasn't screaming matches and grand apologies. It was observation. It was knowing someone so well that you could hand them their own soul wrapped in a blue ribbon. "You want to build this?" I asked, my voice wavering. "It will cost millions. The ROI will be minimal. The return on investment," Julian said, smiling that rare, genuine smile. "We'll be seeing you smile like that every day. I would say that is a solid profit margin." I let the blueprint roll back up. I placed it on the ledge. I stepped into his space, closing the gap between us. "I am not ready for another husband," I said honestly. "I am still learning how to be Eva again." "I know," Julian said. "I am not asking for a ring. I'm just asking for a chance, a dinner, a dance, a partner who knows that load-bearing walls is a romantic topic of conversation." I laughed, and the sound drifted out over the city, lighter than air. "I think," I said, reaching up to touch his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin, "that I would like that very much." I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't the desperate, hungry kiss of a teenage romance. It was a slow, deliberate kiss. It tasted of champagne and patience. It felt like coming home after a long, cold journey. When we pulled apart, the city lights seemed brighter. The noise of the gala downstairs felt a million miles away. "So," Julian said, his eyes twinkling, "shall we go back down? I believe the board is waiting for a toast." I looked at the blueprint one last time, then tucked it securely under my arm. "Let them wait," I said. "I want to look at the skyline for a minute. I want to see where my building is going to go." We stood there for a long time, watching the pulse of Chicago. We talked about the foundation, about the materials for the art center, about the future. We didn't talk about Liam. We didn't talk about Bella. They were footnotes in a history book that I had already closed. Eventually, the cold wind picked up, and we turned to leave. Julian held the door open for me. I stepped through, catching my reflection in the glass. I saw a woman in a blue velvet dress, holding a roll of paper like a scepter, with a man beside her who looked at her as if she hung the moon. I walked toward the elevator, my head high. I was not walking back into the past. I was walking into a future that I had designed, with a partner who was willing to help me build it, brick by brick. As the elevator doors closed, shutting out the cold and the dark, I realized the absolute truth of it all. The sweetest revenge is not destroying your enemies, but living a life so brilliant, they can never touch it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Eva's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Sweet Rose Drama, hit the like button, and give us a hype to help this video reach more people.